Everdark, Episode 98, Weapon of Choice. Last on Everdark, feeling anxious about his parents and unable to sit still, Julian suggests that Damon meet more humans so that he might understand his supposed future subjects. As they dress to attend a fancy evening at a museum gala, Julian tells Damon of one of his adventures with Christian that involved what ended up being a creature from the Everdark that somehow made its way to Earth.
You are not going to the Well of All Souls with Caemorn,
Fiona hissed in Christian's ear. She'd taken him as far away from Caemorn as the suffocatingly small dungeon allowed. Caemorn had helped them with this by going to the back of his cell. Christian was sure, though, that Caemorn knew what they were discussing. Not that Caemorn showed it. The former preceptor leaned against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, legs crossed at the ankles. Caemorn's expression was mild and completely unconcerned. Despite being imprisoned, he looked as cool and clean as if he were lounging in an upscale hotel.
That's exactly what I must do. The longer the Harrows are in Callie's possession, the greater the chance he'll harm them.
Christian pointed out.
We've seen a little of what Damon can do, but Callie has seen all of it. I have a feeling that there's going to come a time when he realizes that there are no good options left for him. So to avenge himself upon Damon, he could destroy the gems and simply disappear.
Fiona's expression darkened as she took in his words. He knew the moment she agreed with him even without reading her thoughts. Her expression cleared, and a worried frown appeared on her lips.
All right, I see your point.
She sighed.
Well, we're not doing this without Balthazar.
He stared hard at her. She blinked.
What?
I can't concentrate when he's here.
Christian stated as his hand snuck into his pants and touched the gem.
I don't want...
Don't want what?
Fiona's eyebrows rose. Christian's lips flattened as he felt a pulse from the gem. It was David, loving him. It made him sick. It made all of these gifts he had regarding the dead seem dirty and wrong. He didn't want Balthazar to be a part of that.
I don't want Balthazar to be associated with this,
he finally said. Her eyebrows lifted more.
But Balthazar is Iros and your gift is from him.
I know, but...
Christian swallowed. She didn't know about David. She couldn't therefore understand why David and being speaker to the dead were connected, and why he wanted to separate his happiness with Balthazar from it.
Balthazar will want to secure everything. He'll want to prepare. I don't think you can do either thing at the Well of All Souls.
You think he won't let you do it?
He will, but only after he's baby-proofed it,
Christian explained. And that was and wasn't true. Balthazar did allow him freedom, but he'd seen a lot more than Christian and knew of dangers that Christian hadn't even heard of.
My gut tells me that I need to do this without him. My mind needs to be focused on the Harrows.
Christian, this would involve taking Caemorn out of that cage, and the three of us being alone with him in the wilds of the Everdark. If that doesn't sound like a terrible idea, I don't know what does.
Fiona told him.
Fiona speaks the truth. If I had some nefarious plan to escape from here.
Caemorn called over, showing he had heard every single thing that they had said and easily overheard them.
You don't have a nefarious plan to escape?
Now Fiona's eyebrows were in her hairline. Caemorn let out a huff and spread his arms.
Where would I go? Where would be safe from Damon?
Well...
Fiona opened and shut her mouth.
I guess I do see your point.
I intend to show Damon I can be an asset, which helping Christian learn his powers would certainly do. So not only do I have no desire to escape, I have no reason to.
Caemorn said.
You are assuming that Damon will ever see you as an ally.
Fiona laughed.
The only difference between you and me, Fiona, is that you were a little quicker to put your lot in with Damon than I was.
Caemorn pointed out. His mouth flickered into an ugly smile.
And you are, of course, Wyvern.
She jerked back as if struck. Christian realized that, unlike Arceus, who had never believed the Immortals evil, Fiona likely had. She was a confessor for the Order. She had been high on the list of people Caemorn counted on to get his plans completed. Balthazar still had a problem being Iros, because of the things he'd heard about the Immortals through the vampire religion, but he hadn't believed like Fiona had likely believed.
You're Callie's fledgling, the one he chose above all else to keep his plans in motion.
Fiona scoffed.
I wasn't lucky in who my master was, but Damon cannot blame me for that. Nor can he blame me for doing what my master wanted all those years.
Caemorn's body language became stiff.
You have no idea what it has been like having the immortal Callie as my master. Damon will understand how the good of what I can do outweighs the bad of what I have done now that I am free of my master.
You rose to the rank of preceptor.
Fiona cried, her hands fisting at her sides.
You weren't some victim, Caemorn. You had power, prestige, influence beyond the dreams of most vampires.
I was chosen and groomed for the position.
Caemorn stepped up to the cage's bars. He was rigid and shaking slightly.
What you might have seen from the outside was not the whole of it by a long shot. You rose only so far because you had no desire to connect with others. Now you are the immortal Wyvern. So what does that say about you?
What do you mean?
Her eyes had gone wide.
Why have you managed to go through your whole second life without friends, without allies even, Fiona? What is holding you back?
Caemorn's eyes narrowed at her with suspicion. Christian was tempted to tell them to shelve this discussion, that it wasn't anything to do with the matter at hand. But he didn't, because he knew it was important. Caemorn challenged Fiona in a way that Balthazar couldn't quite do because she saw him as a rival for Arceus's affection.
I have friends. Arceus
Is kind to everyone. He's like the patron saint of odd vampires.
Caemorn barked.
His befriending you doesn't make you special, Fiona. He's kind to all broken beings.
He loves Balthazar.
Which proves my point.
Caemorn hissed.
Balthazar has never fit in.
Until now. He's Damon's best friend. I bet that irritates you to no end.
Fiona's arms crossed over her chest tightly.
On the contrary, it makes quite a bit of sense to me. Balthazar has always been the comic relief. Damon needs him as a person to get drunk with, to have amusing conversations, but he will need others who can help him in more serious matters.
Caemorn lifted his chin.
And that will be you, will it?
Fiona shook her head. Her beads clacked together.
Callie has proven himself untrustworthy. I am the natural successor to that slot.
Caemorn retorted.
You think too much of yourself.
Fiona snapped.
On the contrary, I am very clear-eyed about myself. I always have been. And about others, too.
Caemorn narrowed his silver eyes at her.
What do you offer, really, Fiona? You are cut off from your own bloodline. You have no interest in humans who he intends to rule no matter what he says. I suppose you can teleport people for him. So that makes you what? A taxi service?
Christian winced at that. Fiona was guarded. It was hard to know who she was, but Christian understood why someone would be that way. It was how he was with new people. It was clear to him that Fiona was protecting herself. Maybe it was because of something that had happened to her in this life, or when she had been Wyvern. Maybe it was simply her nature. But Christian also sensed that she could be a very loyal friend once one won her over. And she had only helped them since she realized the portrait the Order had been painting of Damon was wrong.
Not to mention, she was one of the few who questioned the Order, even though she was devout. She makes up her own mind about things and doesn't follow a crowd. That's admirable.
Fiona growled at Caemorn.
You turned to me often enough, Caemorn. Maybe I'm just someone who gets things done.
Maybe you are.
Caemorn shrugged, appearing to not care about her or this conversation any longer.
All I was saying was that if Damon can find a use for someone like you, then I'm sure he can for me. Neither of us has much to recommend us personality-wise.
You're quite right. Neither of us are amusing. But you can't be trusted, Caemorn.
Fiona said simply.
Not fully, because in the end, you'll always do what is best for you.
And Damon is that.
Caemorn answered with another shrug.
I will give my all to him because of it.
But only for so long as it serves you.
She added.
Do you think there will ever be a time when it does not?
Caemorn laughed dryly. He jerked his head up above.
I've been hearing all of those fools up above bemoaning their fate.
He smoothed a hand down the front of his still immaculate outfit.
I'm still a vampire. They are food. And Damon made that distinction with little more than a snap of his fingers. So I don't think there will ever come a time when being on his team is a bad idea.
Callie seems to think so.
Fiona pointed out.
On the contrary, Callie is hurt because Damon left him.
Christian said quietly.
What we're seeing is him throwing a fit at Damon. He didn't demonize Damon in the Order. He continued to hold him up as the ideal. He might have even intended to give this new peaceful vampire existence to Damon when he woke. But then things went wrong. Perhaps.
Christian shook his head.
I'm not very good at understanding people's motivations, especially if they're emotion-based.
I think you see yourself way too short.
Fiona said kindly.
Logically or emotionally, how the Order venerates Damon says something about how Callie feels.
Indeed, seeing him as wounded by Damon's seeming abandonment, that sounds correct, Christian.
Camor nodded, his tone almost warm as if Christian were his student and he had performed admirably.
And his villainizing of all the other immortals, well, it would set himself up as the favoured one when Damon returned.
Yet he imprisoned Seer and had you kill the Harrows.
Christian said.
He panicked, possibly.
Fiona mused.
He knew he would catch hell for Seer. Maybe he thought he could get things further in order before Damon came back. Or he feared what people would do if they learned where Night Valen was, that they might disturb his rest.
Christian shook his head.
Whatever his motivations then and now, we can't let him keep the Harrows, especially not if you can restore them, Camorn.
Christian's gaze fixed on the Callie vampire. Camorn's mind was closed to him. Christian supposed he was too new at this to get past the defenses of such a formidable vampire. Or perhaps his gifts were more along the lines of just hearing the dead and not the living. He felt David's morbid longing for him then very keenly and slipped his hand out of his pocket. Camorn caught the movement and understood what it was.
It's like having your worst enemy constantly near you, isn't it?
Camorn asked. Christian froze but then relaxed. Camorn knew too much already. What harm was there in him knowing more?
He won't go away. I tried to send him away, but he simply went back into the gem.
Christian shrugged.
He won't leave me alone.
Oh, he could be made to. Part of you must be holding on to him.
Camorn said.
I'm not.
Christian's voice rose up. He pressed his lips together.
I want him gone. I assure you of that.
So he gets to enjoy whatever comes next? After he did whatever he did to you?
Camorn asked.
I just want to be free of him.
Christian's voice sounded small.
I'm with Balthazar now, and I know the difference between what David did and what should be.
Fiona touched his shoulder.
We hold on to bad things, Christian, so we don't forget what the world can do to us. Like a scar that you can rub and remember what is possible.
Camorn's hands were on the bars.
I can send him away, Christian. Or torture him. Or do whatever you wish me to do with him.
I don't want you to harm him,
Christian said with a shake of his head.
He's sick, and I need to be the one that deals with him.
We post updates on our YouTube community tab quite often. You can also join our mailing list, since we send out news a few times a week. I'll post the link to both the community tab and the mailing list form in the notes, so you can be up to date on what's coming.
Camorn nodded, as if this were good.
It's better for certain that you do, because there is the other side to those scars. You can know just what you're capable of if anyone thinks to mess with you.
That was true. Christian liked the idea of being able to protect himself and the ones he loved. That just firmed his resolve to find Julian's parents.
How long would it take to get to the Well of All Souls?
Christian asked.
If Fiona can take us to the Bridge of Passing, I can lead us from there.
Camorn said. Christian frowned.
Why can't Fiona just teleport us?
I've never been there.
She answered, and then added with a furrowed brow.
And I'm guessing it's a place of extreme power which always affects my powers negatively.
How long then from this bridge to the well?
Christian asked.
It would take a few hours.
Camorn said.
A few hours?
Fiona shook her head.
Balthazar will go insane if you're gone that long.
I'll tell him where I'm going and that I'm safe when we're on our way.
Christian answered. Again, that feeling of not wanting Balthazar touched by this aspect of him coming through strongly.
Your instincts to keep him from knowing just how close your powers are to Achilles is the right one, Christian.
Caemorn said with a slow nod.
For as much as an Iros vampire might be loathed, that is nothing compared to Achilles.
Christian, Balthazar adores every part of you. He wouldn't judge you badly for anything.
Fiona said with a surprising amount of vehemence.
Balthazar has never been one to be that open-minded, Fiona.
Caemorn scoffed.
He is about his fledgling, Caemorn.
She pointed out.
You don't have to come, Fiona. I understand if you don't want to be a part of this.
Christian said, though that meant she would just go teleport to Balthazar, tell him everything, and then teleport a hissing, spitting Balthazar to their location. She put a hand on her temple and sighed.
I think this is the wrong plan, Christian. I think you should trust Balthazar not to reject you for any of your powers.
But?
Christian leaned forward.
But I am also a believer in doing things on one's own.
She shook her head as if she couldn't quite believe what she was saying.
This better work because Balthazar is going to have both our heads.
Christian smiled at her.
It will. I feel it will.
He then went over to Caemorn's cage. His eyes met Caemorn's.
You better have been speaking the truth about not escaping or harming either me or Fiona, because there won't be anywhere you're safe from Balthazar or Damon.
I am well aware,
Caemorn said with a tip of his head. Christian unlocked the cage, and Caemorn stepped out. He stretched his arms over his head and twisted his head to each side. There were soft pops, and he let out a contented sigh.
I need to eat before we go, and we should all get weapons. I would have suggested horses, but they don't react well that far out in the Everdark,
Caemorn said, after lowering his arms to his sides.
All right, where are the weapons?
Christian asked.
Just a few floors up. Many are heavily spelled, but there are some that are safe to use.
Caemorn explained and started walking towards the stairs. For a moment, Christian thought of ordering him to walk between him and Fiona like a prisoner, but that seemed foolish. They didn't know where they were going. Caemorn did, and if Caemorn decided to attack them or run, whether he was in front or between them, it would likely make little difference. So Christian gestured for Fiona to go next, but she told him to.
We are going to protect you, Christian,
she said simply. He nodded after a time. He was the weakest, being the youngest and least experienced, so he went up after Caemorn, who was already at the top of the steps. The former preceptor might be acting cool, calm, and collected about getting out of the cage, but it was clear he wanted to spend no more time here. Christian hurried after him. They took the elevator to the 5th floor of the spire. Christian studied the mechanism but couldn't figure out how the car was moving, as there was nothing that was lifting or propelling the car upwards. Caemorn, who was standing with his back to the glass, arms folded again, smiled at Christian's questions and investigation.
It is magic. We haven't been able to reproduce it,
Caemorn explained.
Did Damon and the other immortals build these cities?
Christian asked as they all stepped out of the car onto the 5th floor.
Some say they did. Others claim it was another race altogether who simply vanished or who the immortals drained away,
Caemorn answered. When Christian glanced at Fiona to see if she knew anything more, she shook her head and said,
Despite me supposedly being Wyvern, I have no more information than Caemorn. I have no memories at all of my former self.
Supposedly.
Caemorn snorted as he strode ahead of them along the hallway towards a set of double doors.
I'm not like Balthazar. I don't remember my past. I have no fledglings coming up to me calling me Wyvern.
She bristled.
I am just very good at my gift, that's all. I think they've made a mistake.
You think Damon's made a mistake?
Christian asked.
He doesn't seem to have much faith in me.
Fiona immediately bit her lip as if she'd said too much. Caemorn's thin laugh confirmed she had said too much in front of him.
Maybe he wasn't fond of Wyvern back in the day.
Perhaps not. I do not need to be liked to be respected.
She was rigid again.
You are liked, Fiona. And contrary to what Caemorn said, the fact that Arceus clearly loves you very much says good things about you.
Christian told her. She smiled at him, and the tension dropped from her. Caemorn stopped outside of a set of double doors. There weren't any door handles that Christian could see, but there was an indent that held some kind of design. Camorn twisted off a ring he was wearing and stuck it into this slot. There was a cranking sound, and the doors popped open. Christian leaned around Camorn's tall figure to look inside. Cold, white lights flickered on from thick crystals that studded the arched ceiling above their heads. The room was long and narrow. On the sides were rows upon rows of shelves, with weapons of all sorts placed upon them. At the far end, Christian could see dummies that were wearing armor and robes that wouldn't have been out of place in an RPG.
Damon and Balthazar have borage, so I must pick another weapon,
Camorn muttered as he stepped inside and pulled one of the shelves out. It appeared that the shelves were sitting on tracks that allowed them to extend from the wall, so it was easier to see and take what was lying upon the blue velvet that covered them. Camorn's hands hovered over to a double-handed longsword. The metal gleamed like ice under a full moon. The hilt had alternating black and silver wire. There was a white stone at the base of the hilt and a few marks etched on the blade. Camorn grunted and picked it up. He hefted the weapon and thrust it out in front of him, lowering his head so that his eyes were even with the blade.
Dawnbreaker,
Fiona whispered. Christian looked over his shoulder. Her expression was strange, with awe and fear in equal measure.
that's the name of the weapon. I did not know that anyone could touch it. Last I heard, Tolian did and was dusted.
Yes, Tolian wasn't worthy,
Camorn said and strapped the sword's scabbard to his back.
Is this the first time you picked Dawnbreaker up?
Christian asked. Camorn smiled at him.
Yes.
Fiona let out a gasp, which confirmed Christian's own feeling about this.
You risked getting turned to dust right now? I assume that's what dusted means.
Christian's brows drew together.
I suppose some would call it a risk, but I know my worth.
Camorn answered with a shrug. Against his better judgment, Christian felt a stirring of respect for Camorn. He even thought that Balthazar might be grudgingly impressed.
What weapons are safe?
Fiona asked as her gaze drifted all over the shelves. Camorn stepped down the line of shelves and pulled out 2 shelves on opposite sides of one another. There was a pair of curved daggers, made of that same icy metal as Dawnbreaker, with red stones set into their hilts with a faint tracery of words all along their lengths. Christian immediately felt drawn to them. He thought he heard them talking to him. "Pick me," Christian imagined them saying and laughed internally. That was ridiculous. Besides, the sounds were not distinct. Yet when his hands hovered over the hilts, he knew he was hearing something, a whispering that grew louder as he grew nearer to touching them. When he picked up the daggers, there was the sound of a thunderclap and then silence. He thought he had gone deaf for a moment, but then the normal sounds popped back in. He hefted the daggers in his hands. They felt light, almost too light, as if they were empty and needed filling. There was a belt with 2 scabbards. It felt sort of silly to put weapons on with his normal clothes, but he did it anyway. The daggers easily fitted into their scabbards, and it felt surprisingly right to have them on.
The daggers are called Hope's End,
Camorn said. Christian let out a soft chuckle.
Well, that's evocative.
Indeed.
Christian turned around to see what weapon that Fiona had chosen. It was a longbow, made of a beautiful, shining black wood with a sheaf of glass-tipped arrows. She had knocked one and was looking down the arrow at the far wall, or maybe she was aiming at Camorn. She brought the arrow down and expertly slid it back home with the 24 other arrows. Her hands moved up and down the silky wood of the bow and tested the strength of the string.
Who were the vampires that established these were safe?
Fiona asked as she kept stroking the bow.
If it had been me, I never would have put these back.
When Camorn didn't answer, Christian looked at him sharply.
Did anyone establish these were safe?
Christian asked, already guessing the answer.
No, no one had.
Fiona whispered.
By the order, Camorn, you put Christian's life at risk.
She had an arrow nocked and ready to go. It was aiming at Camorn's heart. He did not react in any way.
There's no way to know if a weapon is truly safe for everyone, Fiona,
Camorn said simply.
but these were safe bets for both of you to the extent that anything is safe.
How so?
Christian's hands fingered the dagger's hilt. He was angry with Camorn, but somehow he couldn't regret touching the daggers. They were his in some way, and he might have been too cautious to pick them up if he'd known the danger involved.
The daggers you so naturally wear have soul gems in the hilts, meaning that they can hold the souls of your enemies.
Camorn explained.
That makes them Kali weapons, not Iros ones.
Fiona hissed, and her arrow was very steady.
Yes, but they have Iros symbols on the blades.
Camorn answered.
So I always believed that they must be made for a speaker. I was right.
Christian rested his palms against the stones that remained cold despite the warmth of his skin.
And the bow and arrows?
Fiona lifted an eyebrow at him even as she continued to have such steady aim. Camorn cracked a smile and let out a bark of laughter.
Oh, come now, Fiona. Surely you recognize Wyvern's bow, Faithkeeper, from the scriptures.
Fiona's expression went completely blank. Her silver eyes showed she wasn't seeing what was ahead of her, but something inside.
Fiona, are you all right?
Christian asked. She shook her head as if to clear it.
Yes, Christian, I'm fine. But we both could have been far from all right by touching these weapons.
Her eyes were on Christian again.
You cannot take such risks with our lives, Camorn. Do what you wish with yours, but ours are not yours to risk.
Camorn's silver eyes glowed hotly in that moment.
Everything is risk, Fiona. Nothing and nowhere are truly safe in the Everdark. You should know that.
He turned to Christian.
I know your worth. I had no doubts that the daggers would respond to you. But
He leaned forward.
there is risk and danger in all of this, Christian. You are a speaker to the dead. Your second life will never be easy because of it. You'll never truly be safe anywhere. But I promise to help you master your gift if you've the courage to follow my lead.
You're asking me to trust you?
Christian asked more than stated.
There has to be trust between a teacher and a student.
Camorn nodded.
Even though this path is not without danger.
Christian qualified.
Especially because it isn't.
Camorn nodded again.
Christian, we can always turn back now. We can go get Balthazar.
Fiona said. Christian's hands closed over the hilts of the daggers. Balthazar would never have allowed Christian to touch these daggers, and he would have been right not to. But then Christian would never have felt the rightness of them, the fact that they belonged to him.
Let's continue.
Christian said.
Camorn, let's get you fed, and then we go to the Well of All Souls.
Join us next time for episode 99, Ruthless.
Have you wanted to support us but have no money? There is a very important way you can help us out. If you know one person who would truly enjoy this story, send them to the first episode. Since gay romantic audio stories are not exactly mainstream content, it's hard for people to find us in a world where Mr. Beast challenges and true crime podcasts reign over us all. But by recommending us, you can help the story get discovered and help someone in your life find what might be their next fiction addiction. I'll post a link to episode 1 in the notes.
Everdark, episode 99, Ruthless. Last on Everdark, Christian determines to release Camorn. They go to the armory and choose magical weapons, daggers for Christian and a bow for Fiona. But these weapons could have destroyed them just as easily as what awaits them in the Everdark. Christian accepts this risk, and the risk of trusting Camorn. We turn back to Julian and Damon at the museum. The smell of blood flowed over Damon like a tidal wave as they lightly walked up the steps and into the brightly lit museum. His eyelids fluttered nearly shut as the scent of hundreds of well-fed and mostly healthy humans entered his nostrils like the largest floral bouquets. His veins and arteries felt as if they were filled with dust when faced with such a feast. Julian glanced over at him nervously.
Are you okay? Is it too much?
His fledgling was already so attuned to him. His wants, his needs, his desires. even the slightest discomfort, and Julian wanted to help, always to help and succor. But he also knew his fledgling was worried for the humans too. Julian was just beginning to understand his power and his hunger. He smiled and patted Julian's arm that was linked with his. "I am fine, but I must do some grazing." Julian's eyebrows listed even as an uncertain smile lit up his face.
Grazing? Well, what do you...
"It is a game," Damon explained. "You drink from as many unsuspecting people as you can. You see how long it is before anyone notices."
Well, if you use your Iros gift, then no one will notice, right?
But Damon shook his head. "No, you must do it without using mind control. Well, not exactly mind control. Every vampire can seduce a human. That is what you are limited to." Julian considered this.
Sounds challenging.
"It is, which is why it is fun. Especially in a place such as this, where there are so many people and, potentially, so many witnesses," Damon told him.
Are you going to try it here?
Julian looked a combination of intrigued and scandalized with his wide eyes and flushed cheeks. Damon thought he would do it just to amaze his fledgling. It would be a teaching lesson as well. Julian could not actually drink from another yet, not for some time, and Damon wasn't even sure he ever wanted Julian to drink from another. But a simple press of lips to the nape of a neck, or a brush of fangs across a throat would do. "I think I may. I think you may as well. We shall see." Damon pulled Julian closer to him as they approached two men in dark suits, earpieces, and grim expressions that asked for the invite. Julian looked alarmed.
We forgot to get the invite from Arceus.
"There is no need." Damon smiled broadly as he turned to the rude man who thought to bar their entrance to this delectable feast. "We are invited." The security guard's craggy face went blank for a moment, before emotions flooded back in. It took no effort at all to have the man not only usher them in, but smile as he did so, which, from the briefest touch of his mind, Damon knew he hardly did in his normal life. The museum foyer reminded Damon a bit of Everdark architecture, with its white marble, soaring vaulted ceiling, gold and silver inlay, and the general sense of grandeur. This greeting room stood 100 feet long and just as wide. People on the second floor leaned on balcony railings to look down at the first floor and scope out those that had just come inside. The bones of a monstrous beast were linked together to present a fiction of its stalking invisible prey, though one sniff told Damon that those bones were fake, made of something light and papery, so that they could soar easily on the thin wires that held them together and upright. The originals were likely someplace in the museum, as he did scent true bone that was not human in this place. There were elaborate paintings on the walls in between the arched hallways that stood twice as tall as him, done in vibrant oils that seemed to induce one to look closer at their shadows and light. The hallways that led deeper into the museum's interior were intriguing to Damon. In glass boxes that were lit artfully from below were the relics of former human ages. Coins, pottery, armor, jewelry, and more. Humanity seemed obsessed with its own history, a history that it could not fully remember. That was likely why Henry was so obsessed with speaking to Arceus. As fascinating as vampire and immortal history might be, humans seemed to be desperately looking for their own. It was something he would have to remember. People dressed in tuxedos, similar to his and Julian's, but few as finely made, and others in dresses that glittered with inlaid gemstones or cut from shimmery silk, danced and weaved all about them. Their conversation was bright, and sometimes brittle. For many, coming here was to put on a play. They were acting for the benefit of others. Some laughed too loudly, others nervously fingered their finery. Some narrowed their eyes and drank too much of the fizzy champagne or dark red wine, not for pleasure, but to calm nerves or numb bad feelings. There were shark-like smiles as men and women circled each other, looking for advantage and weakness. It was all very familiar to him, for as much as things changed, they also stayed the same. And as loath as he was to admit it, with his rosy-colored glasses on, in the past the immortals had been like this too. Not with him, but with each other. Callie had tried to tell him this. Iros had too, with a laugh, though. And Seer had tried to weave these bad traits into a good future. Don't you see that we couldn't be our best selves without you, Damon? Callie's voice flitted in his mind. Damon's head jerked up, but he was not sure if he imagined this voice or if it had been real. His focus turned back to the security man he'd enthralled, who had led them into the very center of the beautiful room and enthused, "There's champagne being served. Oi, Janet, bring the gents some glasses of the best stuff. There." Special guests, Damon suggested to him, even as Julian's eyebrows lifted more. His fledgling knew of their powers and how easy this was for him, but it still felt so new and amazing seeing it done in a place where Julian had been before. The guard, his name was George, nodded and smiled. "Special guests." One of the servers, dressed in a short black skirt and white top with a frozen smile on her face, Janet, evidently, frowned. George was not her favorite, and he wasn't to give her orders. He might be security for the museum, but she worked for the catering staff. So what if they had dated an age ago? That didn't give him a right to order her about and— "Janet?" Julian's voice rolled out warm and sweet, with a hint of the Iros gift in it. His fledgling was so handsome that even without the gift he likely could get his way in many situations. Janet looked at Julian and pinked. Even though George had just said her name, it seemed miraculous to her that this gorgeous guy knew it. And didn't he look familiar? Like a celebrity or something? She wasn't sure. She'd seen him before, but he was much too good-looking. And oh, he had such kind yet mesmerizing eyes to be just a normal person in a normal job.
Yes?
Janet answered as if her name was a question to her as well. Julian's smile broadened and he reached into his pocket. When his fingers appeared, between them was a $100 bill. He took her hand and pressed it against her palm as he said,
I'd really appreciate it if you could get my friend here the best champagne and appetizers tonight. Would you be willing to do that?
She nodded dumbly, looking up at Julian with wide, glassy eyes.
Oh, of course.
Julian dazzled her with another smile.
We really appreciate it.
I'm happy to.
She looked about ready to pass out from that happiness, and Damon hid his amusement and pride behind a cough. She was carrying a silver tray full of glasses of champagne, but when Damon moved to lift two up for him and Julian, she waved him back. Whispering conspiratorially, she said,
Oh, this is swill. I'll be back with something special for you both. Stuff that's saved for the mayor and his cronies. Don't you worry.
We so look forward to it, Janet, Damon murmured. That had her giggling and racing off. Julian turned to George, who was looking at them with a beaming smile as if he was the proud parent of two very good children. The other security guard was glancing over at him with a strange expression that was turning into an aggrieved one as the line into the museum had turned from 2 lines to 1. "Thank you, George. You best get back to your post," Damon suggested. With a sigh, George nodded, wished them a wonderful evening and went back to the marble-arched doorway to check invites and let in approved guests. All he would remember of them, if he remembered at all, would be that he had met someone very special, people who had been respectful to him as well.
That was cool, but a little creepy at the same time.
Julian laughed and shook his head.
Though man, being able to charm people like that in some of the sticky situations that Christian and I have been in would have been quite handy.
Like the French village, Damon suggested. Julian nodded.
But would it have worked as well on people who were intent on sacrificing us?
Of course, Damon answered without hesitation. Humans are not known for their abilities to withstand mind control. You might find a person or two that is slightly resistant, but those who would serve a squall would be quite open to suggestion. Julian's forehead furrowed.
Do you really think it was a squall?
Damon nodded. Undoubtedly. If 2 such creatures were to exist in interconnected worlds, it would not surprise me. "Things slipped through from the Everdark," Callie said, or he imagined Callie saying. "The vampires had no control over it. I thought that no one did until you returned and I saw differently. You did not tell anyone of this connection you have, not even Iros. Not even me. The hurt in Callie's possibly imagined voice was so like them. Damon almost sighed. Callie had always wanted perfect transparency between them. Sharing secrets meant intimacy. It was the only way that Callie understood that term. Knowledge was power, and sharing knowledge was to share that power. And you had to love and trust to share power. Julian lifted his head up to study Damon's face.
But you are humanoid. Not altogether human if people look closely at you, but you're definitely like people here.
Damon could hear the hunger for answers in Julian's tone as well as his mind. Callie's love of knowledge was to hoard it, and then use it when it best suited them to gain an advantage. Julian simply wanted to know, because the world was wondrous and understanding it was the point of existence. Damon nodded slowly. We picked forms that would be as close to the population we were feeding on as possible.
So what do you really look like?
Julian's eyes were narrowed as he studied Damon's face as if he could see beyond the flesh and bone. Nothing like this. But it does not matter anymore. This form is the one I wear from now on. Damon leaned down and kissed Julian's forehead. The furrows immediately smoothed out. His fledgling realizing he wasn't going to have his curiosity satisfied that night.
All right, keep your secrets.
Julian responded good-naturedly.
Besides, tonight is about you learning about modern humans, politicians in particular.
This podcast is not the only thing I do. I actually run my own subscription site, which is like a Patreon, but with far more content. On the site, I have written stories, recorded podcast episodes, and manga. These are all gay romance with something magical about them. Elves, vampires, shifters, mages. You get the idea. And I've been doing this since 2010, before Patreon even existed. I'll tell you more about everything you get, including millions of words of archived stories and the sexy parts of the podcast episodes after the chapter is done.
These humans are but children. The politicians he speaks of will be putty in your hands. Even the ones who are afraid or disgusted by what we are will be eager to do business with you, Callie murmured. They know power. They will want to glom onto yours, as the other immortals did. They will even pretend to have some kind of nobility to earn your favor. Again, just like the immortals did. Damon's eyes swept the room. There were hundreds of people in the museum. That wasn't necessarily a problem for him. His mind lightly covered them all. He did not feel Callie. There were some vampires there, though, but they were scattered throughout, and none held the signature of an immortal. He was amused, though, that they had finally figured out that he and Julian were there. They edged closer to look, thinking he would not know. They were as much children as the humans were. At that moment, Janet returned. She was bearing her silver platter again, but this time with 2 flutes of champagne and 2 small plates piled with small bites of food. They were the tastiest morsels. Damon rarely ate this type of food, but he enjoyed it in small amounts, which made these appetizers perfect for his taste. He would try to get bite-sized amounts of everything, but wouldn't have to eat more. There were puffs of bread, filled with melted cheese and ham. There were buttered toasts, heaped with fine black caviar. There were shrimp, topped with tangy red sauce and fiery horseradish. There were delicately fried egg rolls, filled with finely chopped carrots and cabbage, bundles of glass noodles and soy-sautéed pork. There was much more that he couldn't identify through Julian's understanding, but he was anxious to taste them all. He popped one of the egg rolls in his mouth, enjoying the crunch and the umami of sweet and sour and earthy that exploded on his tongue. He let out a pleasurable moan even as he took in a deep breath and scented blood. Hot blood all around him, hot blood waiting for him. Hot blood. You should not waste your time on human food. You need to eat. Callie almost sounded concerned as they had once had. They rarely bothered themselves with bodily needs. You starved for so long, didn't you? I did look for you, but Seer hid Nightfallen from us. She feared what the other immortals would do. So do not think that I am the only one who saw the dark side of them, my king. Julian smiled winningly at Janet, causing her to nearly swoon once more, even as Damon ate more of the appetizers on his plate. He hardly tasted them, but he did it anyway because he did not want Callie to be right about anything.
Here's just for starters.
She lowered her voice again. Her actions did make sense. At least half a dozen people had attempted to flag her down or take the food and drink meant for them.
I'll keep watch on you two and make sure you're taken care of.
Thank you, Janet.
Julian said again.
You bet.
With a frighteningly bright smile, she turned on her heel and marched away. Remember now how easy it is to control humans. Your fledgling of but a few days can do it with ease. Did you really think the others wouldn't abuse their power? Callie's voice again drifted through his mind. It came from nowhere and everywhere, so Damon did not bother to lift his head to scan the crowd. I think you overdid it, Damon murmured in Julian's left ear, thrusting his uneasiness of what Callie was saying to him, or what he imagined Callie would say if they were here. She was half in love with you without the Iros mind control. Now you've taken her heart. His fledgling colored.
Yeah, well, there's only one heart I want.
Julian put a hand over Damon's heart. The moment stretched, and the tinkling laughter and voices died away until only each other's heartbeats could be heard. Julian's easy smile was replaced by one that was deeper, but almost more tenuous. Julian wanted to love him completely. He already did, but he was afraid. Julian had loved his parents that well, and they had left. Would Damon? The Harrows had seemed strong and brave and true, better than others. So how had they ended up prisoners of Callie? Couldn't that happen to Damon as well? The best were often defeated by the worst. You do not need to fear, Damon found himself saying. It is not like that. Julian blinked. He had not been consciously aware of these thoughts and fears.
Like what?
Damon considered how to answer. The truth. Julian would want that even if it were complicated and perhaps not as shiny bright as he believed Damon to be. I'm not like your parents, Damon murmured, which had Julian's gaze becoming more shadowed than before. This time out was to distract him from thoughts of them, not to speak of them. Callie is not the villain. Julian's forehead bunched.
I don't understand.
Damon knew this lack of understanding was an out for him. He could just brush this off and not say more, but he was determined to treat Julian as an equal. Even though part of him wanted to make things easy for Julian, he could not. It would just make this understanding harder later. Oftentimes, the villain is whoever the victor says they are, yes? You know this from your understanding of history, Damon pressed. Julian gave a half smile and nodded.
Yes, of course.
I know Callie is a villain in many ways when we look at things from our perspectives, Damon explained slowly. What he did to your parents was wrong, but...
He didn't see it that way. They were no one and nothing to him.
Julian filled in. His expression was unhappy, but he did understand where Damon was going for this. He saw removing them from the board as keeping safe all that he had built. Callie has no love of people. Damon gave a rueful smile. But he, above all, would say, what is the point of ruling if there is no one left to rule? Julian's arms crossed over his chest.
So he saw what he was doing as necessary to stop the war and make sure one didn't happen again. Yeah, I get that, but he still misled people. He lied about things that matter. Religion is...
Julian bit his lower lip as he struggled to form his ideas. Finally, he gestured towards some of the beautiful necklaces in a nearby case. Though he knew nothing of human religions, he felt something spiritual about them.
All of this, and not just the obvious religious stuff, represents human search for a greater truth in the world,
Julian explained.
Where do we come from? Why are we here? What is the ultimate best use of the time and talents we're given? Callie took that away from vampires, and humanity too, by creating this false history. It's like he took away the very soul of the people he lied to.
That bothers you greatly. I can see this. Damon nodded. Julian's jaw tightened.
There's this phrase, Peace at any price. That's what Callie did. The price was truth. That's
Too high? Julian nodded. He turned those purple eyes upon Damon.
what you were trying to tell me with this stuff about Callie being a villain from a certain point of view is that you are a villain too. That you're not,
Julian was biting his lower lip.
that you aren't like my parents, because you can be an even bigger villain than Callie.
Damon set the food and drink down on a stone railing around the magnificent fake monster and cupped Julian's face. I am still who you think I am in many ways. I can be that. But I am...
Complicated?
Julian's eyebrows rose. I am a predator, Julian. I am not tame. I am not... He looked around at the people who swirled past them. I am not like them. I am not even like the vampires or the other immortals. Julian studied him.
Yeah, I can sort of see that, sometimes.
He does not truly understand how ruthless you are, and how that makes you mostly untouchable. Callie sounded weary. You will stop at nothing if someone crosses you. Am I in your sights now, my king? I, who have truly served you faithfully while the others almost destroyed all you worked for? Damon drew his thumbs along Julian's cheeks, relishing the softness of the skin there. People were looking with heavy-lidded desire at the two of them, and some with scandalized pink cheeks. But he did not care. He liked others to see what was his. Just know that you are not going to lose me, my one, Damon murmured. That is all you need to know. Let that worry go. After a moment, Julian nodded. His fledgling turned his face into Damon's right palm and kissed it. Damon smiled broadly. Come, let us graze on these politicians and all who make this city run, Damon suggested as he placed a hand on Julian's lower back. And though Damon did not look for Callie as they began to circulate, Damon knew connections to the immortal were there. He would find them. Like Callie had said, Damon was ruthless. Join us next time for episode 100, Aggression.
What else do you get as a member of wraithrain.com besides the unedited audio versions of Everdark, Dragon's Reign, and the Sexy Times for Empire of Stars? I write a lot of stories. Far more than Dragon's Reign and Everdark. Everdark is just one of my gay, romantic, epic-length adventures. Since 2010, I've written long gay romance web novels with hot heroes falling in love with each other, whether it's honorable elven warriors, fierce dragon shifters, sensual mermen, fallen angels and demons, and reincarnated immortal vampires. When you join, you can read all of these on my serial membership site. The completed stories are there in full for you to read as fast as you want, and the ongoing stories get 3 chapters every week, so I can torture you with cliffhangers. I mean, entertain you, not torture. Kat, who wrote this script? But don't worry, you can tell me exactly what you think of that in the comments at the end of every chapter. As a member, you can be in my own personal peanut gallery. There's also manga. My first foray into romance was actually yaoi manga. And since the very beginning, I've collaborated with artists to create both Western and Asian graphic novels that are posted 1 page at a time in the members-only area. Even if you're not a manga person per se, when you're a member, you get them free. So why not check out the amazing detailed work of our artists while waiting for me to post the next chapter? If this sounds interesting to you, try us out for a month. The link to sign up is in the notes. The most you'll pay is $9.95 a month, and you'll be directly supporting us, real people, not big corporations like Amazon or Netflix, not content created with AI. Wraith Rain is a small team of actual humans doing the best we can to transport you with romantic action and adventure stories. We really thank you for your support.
Everdark, Episode 100, Aggression. Lost on Everdark. Damon believes he is hearing Callie's voice as he and Julian charm their way into the museum gala. Callie reminds him that he's always been loyal, but the other immortals were not, and perhaps what he did was for the best. Damon attempts to warn Julian that he is not like him, the vampires, or the other immortals. Now we return to Christian. The Bridge of Passing was more evocative than its initial name would have led Christian to believe. It was a curved wooden bridge that crossed a rushing silver-black stream of water, or Christian thought it was water, but it could have been anything, though its smell seemed like water on earth, only fresher, cleaner. It had a cold smell like snow and frozen stone.
Mountain snows,
Camorn said. Christian's eyebrows rose.
I thought only the Iros can read minds.
and you would be right.
Camorn dipped his head in acknowledgement. The hilt of Dawnbreaker sparkled when he moved as light from the twin moons caught it.
You were looking at the river so intently, your thoughts were practically taking physical form.
Yes, I was wondering.
Christian shook his head. Now wasn't the time to become fascinated by minutiae. He could already feel Balthazar poking his mind. His master was being polite and not simply looking into his thoughts, but that wouldn't last at the rate his worry was growing.
I'm wondering about everything in this place.
Christian gestured around the three of them. The white stone road that wound through those impossibly large and deep green trees to the light of the spire in the far distance. Fiona had teleported them from there after Camorn had drained 3 of the former vampires nearly to death. He had done it without seeming any desire or hunger. He'd let them fall like sacks of grain to the ground in full swoons. It was a workmanlike and efficient act. The only emotion Camorn had showed was when they'd heard howls of werewolves in the distance, and he'd whispered the names of his former pets, Tarn and Farun. But then, Christian's expression and thoughts had become like a mirror that showed Christian nothing but his own worries.
Yes, it is fascinating.
Camorn agreed with a nod.
Before I was forced into the role of preceptor,
Oh, forced?
Fiona did not hide her disdain for what she clearly thought of as a lie. She was staring back at the spire as if she wanted to go back to the lights and other vampires more than anything. A muscle in Camorn's jaw tightened, but he answered blandly,
it was never my choice. I enjoy power, yes, but I truly have always wanted to be an academic and adventurer. I wanted to map the Everdark, understand some of its wonders and horrors, and bring back that knowledge to the vampires.
Fiona didn't say anything, but Christian felt her disbelief loud enough for her to have almost spoken out loud. He didn't necessarily agree with her. She was too prejudiced to see any good in Camorn, and maybe she had a point. He was powerful and dangerous. He likely shouldn't be trusted. But there was something about him that reminded Christian of Loki, a being that could cause great mischief, but also had a point to the actions he took.
Julian and I see ourselves that way.
Christian said. Again, a nod.
Your show, of course. It's quite good.
Christian's forehead furrowed.
You've watched it?
Camorn gave him a dry smile.
Yes, I had to keep track of your progress in case you found Nightfallen.
Oh, yes. So not out of interest then.
Christian was surprised that he felt nettled by this.
On the contrary, I quite enjoyed it. I am hoping that after these troubles pass, that you will continue on with your adventuring and the recording of it.
Camorn said generously.
Julian and I are already thinking about it. Now that we know about Everdark, we need to explore it.
Christian couldn't help the enthusiasm growing in his voice. Exploring was something that connected his first and second lives. He wanted to continue doing so very much.
It would be an even bigger hit among vampires.
Camorn coughed and said with a bit of discomfort.
I would be happy to accompany you on your adventures.
You will be in a jail cell most likely, or turned back into a mortal.
Fiona said this as she turned on her heel to face them both. She softened her tone as she said to Christian,
We should get a move on. Everdark is very dangerous, and the more time you spend outside the city walls, the more attention we draw to ourselves from the wrong sort.
Christian thought of the creatures that Damon had so effortlessly summoned, and his hands dropped down onto the hilts of his daggers. They weighed practically nothing, but the metal felt good and solid against his palms.
Yes, you're right. I think I was focusing on the river because I'm a little worried about what's ahead. But we need to move,
Christian said. When Christian started to simply walk ahead at normal speed, Camorn let out a small laugh. Christian jerked his head towards Camorn, frowning.
What?
Christian demanded to know. Camorn put a light hand on his shoulder. Christian tensed, and he quickly removed it, but said,
Relax, Christian. I am not criticizing you. But you don't have to act human here.
Christian frowned again. That answer didn't elucidate things at all.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Walking places. We need to get somewhere fast and we can't use teleportation.
Camorn gestured to Fiona. She crossed her arms over her chest and answered tightly.
I have explained why I cannot simply teleport us to the Well of All Souls, and if I just teleported us to the farthest spot I see,
She pointed into the eternal twilight ahead of them.
things will be drawn to us. Believe me, you don't want that.
She shuddered.
Quite.
Camorn turned back to Christian.
But we have other skills than teleportation,
Like...
Christian's eyebrows rose.
such as running very fast without tiring.
Camorn said, and then did just that. He darted over the bridge and skidded to a stop 10 feet from the edge of it. He'd been practically a blur. He spread his arms wide.
See? Stop thinking like a human, Christian. Embrace your inner vampire.
Camorn again started running ahead of them. Christian turned to Fiona. She shrugged.
Whatever gets us there and back faster, Christian.
She told him. He nodded, and they both ran. Christian let out a stunned gasp at the speed he was easily able to maintain. The world, conversely, seemed to slow down around him, even as the trees were a blur. He easily reached Camorn's side, and the three of them ran together. He could see both Camorn and Fiona clearly as they were running at the same speed. He laughed. Fiona joined him. Camorn even smiled. They ran without a break for 30 minutes. Christian felt no exhaustion. His limbs were as fresh as they had been when they'd started out. The reds and blue moons of the Everdark seemed to fill him with energy. He felt almost drunk with the light and the trees and the mysterious white path that led them far away from any sort of civilization. Going this fast also meant that they avoided many of the Everdark's creatures too. He'd heard the roar of many monsters that caught sight of them rapidly fade away as they simply outpaced them. But then Camorn had reached out and gestured for them to slow and stop.
Let us take a break for a moment.
Camorn advised. Christian did, and realized he wasn't even breathing hard, nor was he sweating.
I feel fine.
I am glad you do, but you are still new and can overexert yourself easily, and we do not have Balthazar here to feed you.
Camorn reminded him. Balthazar was probing a little harder now. He had said he was going to let his master know their plans when they reached the bridge, but he had thought better of it. Balthazar was quite capable of ordering him home, and unlike his parents, he could truly make Christian obey.
I will tell him when we're at the well. That way he'll let me stay, as I will already be in danger.
He knew that this statement wasn't really logical. It was like a child trying to rationalize doing something they knew they should not do.
But I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult.
But he knew that wasn't exactly legitimate either. He was a child when it came to being a vampire. And he had released a prisoner, a powerful prisoner who had been his master's rival. Not to mention them taking magical weapons that could have dusted him from the vault, only to now be in the middle of a forest, heading for a sacred well to talk to the dead.
That sounds bad. That sounds dangerous. But it'll be worth the risks in the end to free Julian's parents. And he would eventually have to allow me to do this anyway. This is the only way to reach the Harrows, so I'm just being efficient.
Balthazar would not buy that argument. He wondered if masters grounded their fledglings or punished them in other ways for disobedience. He supposed they did. But Balthazar wouldn't. Would he?
Even if he does, it's worth it.
Christian turned to look back at the way they had come with his hands on his hips. He felt a sudden sense of disorientation as the spire was no longer in sight. Only a faint light could be seen on the far horizon, and Christian took a step back the way they had come. Fiona grasped his arm gently. When he looked at her questioningly, she gave him a look of understanding.
We'll be back to civilization soon enough. The Everdark, for all its wonders, does cause a certain kind of homesickness. It makes one feel one's insignificance.
Again, I thought only Iros could read minds.
Christian told her with a grateful smile.
I remember my first time traveling out into the Everdark,
She said, and her gaze went distant.
I was following the edge of a deep lake, silvered by the moons. It was so beautiful. My heart ached just looking at it. I was halfway around it before I realized how far I had gone. And then, the moonlight that made the water's surface like a mirror was disturbed and I could see beneath the surface for a moment.
What did you see?
He leaned forward eagerly to her. Her gaze was still unfocused.
A city, far below the surface, and there were beings living in it.
Mermaids and mermen?
Christian was charmed at the idea, but the thought of them living in dark water wasn't altogether comforting. Fiona's expression told him that she didn't feel comforted either.
They were beautiful, but I would say they were more like sirens who lured people to their deaths in the deep.
Christian's eyes went wide.
I suppose that makes sense. Everything here is rather aggressive.
They would have to be in order to survive. With vampires and immortals here, think of what they're up against.
Caemorn said, having silently followed their conversation.
And speaking of creatures of the Everdark, there are some nearby that you might be interested in, Christian.
When people find our free audio stories on Spotify or YouTube, they often ask, how is something with the high quality of Edward Fox and all those amazing actors still free? Well, the answer is, it isn't. I and my team are supported by memberships. I run my own private website, wraithrain.com. On this website, I've published gay romance, written stories, manga, and now uncensored podcasts since 2010. It's like my own version of Patreon, which I started because at that time, Patreon didn't exist. If you love this podcast and want to support the creation of more like it, consider joining us as a member and getting access to exclusive members-only stories. I'll tell you how to sign up and what you'll get at the end of this chapter.
Christian left the path and gestured with his fingertips for Christian and Fiona to follow after him.
We shouldn't leave the path, Caemorn.
Fiona hissed.
This is definitely how people get in trouble.
I assure you that we are in no danger from these particular creatures, considering my skills, Fiona.
Caemorn whispered, though he did not turn to look at her. All three of them crouched low so that their heads were just above the underbrush. At first, Christian didn't understand what had attracted Caemorn's attention, let alone what should interest him. But then he felt almost a cold caress on his skin, his breath frosted.
Ghosts!
His right hand dove into his pocket as he thought that David had escaped the gem, but it was not him that was sucking all the warmth out of the air. Caemorn had dropped to his haunches inside a group of bushes. He signaled for Christian to join him. Both he and Fiona silently glided to Caemorn's sides. That was when Christian saw the blue-white glow of the ghosts. They were like he had seen in old movies that represented ghosts as women in white drifting around ruins. In fact, there were ruins there. A small cottage, perhaps where these women had lived. They had long hair and wore ragged gowns that obscured their feet and never touched the ground. They let out a soft sound, humming, moaning. It was a sad sound that immediately had Christian thinking of rainy days where the cloud cover was more like an anvil hanging over his head than a cozy respite from the sun. The ghosts' faces were of two pretty women. Both of them looked to be in their 20s or 30s. If the ages they presented now were accurate, it was highly unlikely that they had died of natural causes. Disease was still a possibility, but Christian was betting that they had met a violent fate. Wasn't that necessary to make a ghost? Or were these ghosts just spirits that had always been this way?
Are they the souls of people who have died?
Christian asked Caemorn. Caemorn gave a single nod, his eyes never leaving them.
why would they have been living out here, so far from the spire?
Fiona whispered.
Perhaps the spire did not exist when they lived here. Perhaps the sun shone in the Everdark then.
Camorn murmured. Fiona's head jerked towards Camorn.
That's heresy.
Camorn gave her an even look.
Because Damon is the greatest and creator of all things. He has not said he created the Everdark, has he?
What are you two talking about?
Christian's brow furrowed.
There are two theories about the Everdark.
Fiona explained.
One is that it is the sacred homeworld to the immortals, and that everything you see here was created by them.
I don't think so from what Damon said.
Christian murmured. Both Fiona and Camorn looked at him intently. He was a little surprised by their intentness at first, but then he realized how normal it was for them to be this way. He was speaking of their origins, of the immortals' origins.
I don't know for sure,
Christian said carefully.
but Damon has indicated that he and the immortals came from somewhere else. That's all. That they found this place. But I could be wrong.
Well, it would work into the other story about the Everdark.
Camorn said.
Which is...
They banished the light and caused all the vegetation and beings who lived in this place before they came to transform into the creatures we see now.
Camorn explained.
Huh. That would make them even more powerful than I thought.
Christian admitted. He turned to Fiona.
Why don't the vampires like that story? They'd be far more aggressive than the ones I've met.
He used the same term that he had to describe the creatures here.
Because we view the Everdark as our home, not conquered territory.
She admitted.
But I see how this history would appeal to some.
So you think maybe they were killed when the immortals came here?
Christian asked Camorn. The Calais vampire shrugged.
Possibly. No person in their right mind lives so far out from the cities.
Some do.
Fiona broke in.
I have heard that many vampires have gone out to find quieter places to live and
Either never returned or come back battered and nearly half dead again. None of them have ever been the same again.
Camorn said sharply.
Even if they could stay out there, say by your lake, eventually the creatures would take them down or worse.
Maybe it'll be different now, with Damon back.
Christian suggested. Fiona and Camorn both considered this. Fiona rubbed her arms as if suddenly cold. Camorn shrugged.
Anything is possible with him,
Camorn said.
I do not understand his desire to associate with these beings.
Fiona admitted.
Maybe he likes seeing what he has wrought on his enemies.
Camorn replied dryly.
He's not cruel like you are, Camorn.
Fiona frowned deeply at him.
I would not be so sure. To be king of a predator species, he must be ruthless, if nothing else.
Camorn pointed out. Christian blocked out their soft bickering as he watched one ghost pass through the white stone walls of the structure and then pass back in again. There was what looked like the remnants of a hearth that one continued to pace in front of, while her sister, he already thought of them as related and sisters, not mother and daughter due to the closeness in age, circled the whole of the cottage.
Now, I did not bring you out here simply to observe.
Camorn breathed in Christian's left ear.
What did you bring me here for? Oh, you want me to try and talk to them?
Christian pointed to the ghosts.
Indeed. Practice, practice, practice.
Camorn repeated.
But these ghosts aren't like the Harrow spirits,
Christian observed.
These spirits seem... Whoa!
He let out a startled cry as Camorn pushed him out of the bushes and towards the ghosts. He looked back at the Calais vampire with annoyance and alarm. Fiona was about to move and get him, but Camorn had her right wrist. She could have teleported over to Christian regardless of that hold, or she could have simply struck Camorn in the face and dashed to Christian. But she was holding back. Maybe she, too, knew that this was good for him to try out before they got to the well. Christian turned back to the cottage and jerked back as he saw both ghosts were well aware of him now and standing, or floating at the edge of the cottage, looking at him. There wasn't exactly surprise on their faces, and there certainly wasn't a welcoming look either, but they weren't attacking him.
Though, even if they did, what could they do to me? They're incorporeal.
Christian opened his mind and reached for theirs, but at the last moment he pulled back. It was rude to simply reach into another person's mind. He had to introduce himself. Besides, he'd never had to do anything more than speak to reach the dead before. He cleared his voice and said,
Hello, my name is Christian. What are yours?
They did not answer. They continued to float and stare. Christian glanced over his shoulder at Camorn for instruction, but the Kali vampire just shrugged and urged him to keep going. Christian turned back to the ghosts.
I'm a speaker to the dead.
Christian explained to them. The ghost on the right tilted her head to the side. Perhaps that was a good sign. She was responding to him at least.
And I would like to speak with you.
He winced. He was really sounding like an idiot. He took a step towards them. The ghost on the left jerked her head back. He stopped and held out his hands in a placating manner.
Don't be afraid. I mean you no harm. Indeed, I simply want to converse with you,
he assured them.
But can they understand English? Why would they? I'm hoping my powers do some kind of translating.
But that was ridiculous. There was no translation here, not unless he touched their minds. He would have to do that because thoughts had no language.
I'm going to touch your minds. I am an Iros vampire,
he explained, which, of course, if they did not understand English, would not prepare them at all for what he was about to do.
Here goes nothing.
He opened his mind again like Balthazar had taught him, and reached for the ghosts' minds. He could feel them immediately. They were two cool, cold orbs. His mind circled them as if looking for a door. The ghost on the right's eyes started to narrow. That was when he saw the keyhole, or what was the equivalent of that in their minds. He could unlock it and open it up and go through. Their pretty faces were still blank, maybe a little suspicious, but still not aggressive. He smiled at them tremulously. He was going to touch the minds of beings that had existed on Everdark for who knew how long. He was going to learn things from them that maybe only Damon knew. Going into the minds of ghosts. Ghosts was the ultimate adventure. Christian opened their locks and touched their minds. He was smiling broadly at them, and that was when he heard what they were thinking for the first time.
Kill him?
The ghost on the left seemed to ask the one on the right. The ghost on the right smiled then.
Yes, let's.
Join us next time for episode 101. Chosen.
What else do you get as a member of wraithrain.com besides the unedited audio versions of Everdark, Dragon's Reign, and the Sexy Times or Empire of Stars? I write a lot of stories. Far more than Dragon's Reign and Everdark. Everdark is just one of my gay, romantic, epic-length adventures. Since 2010, I've written long gay romance web novels with hot heroes falling in love with each other, whether it's honorable elven warriors, fierce dragon shifters, sensual mermen, fallen angels and demons, and reincarnated immortal vampires. When you join, you can read all of these on my serial membership site. The completed stories are there in full for you to read as fast as you want, and the ongoing stories get 3 chapters every week, so I can torture you with cliffhangers. I mean, entertain you, not torture. Cat, who wrote this script? But don't worry, you can tell me exactly what you think of that in the comments at the end of every chapter. As a member, you can be in my own personal peanut gallery. There's also manga. My first foray into romance was actually yaoi manga. And since the very beginning, I've collaborated with artists to create both Western and Asian graphic novels that are posted 1 page at a time in the members-only area. Even if you're not a manga person per se, when you're a member, you get them free. So why not check out the amazing detailed work of our artists while waiting for me to post the next chapter? If this sounds interesting to you, try us out for a month. The link to sign up is in the notes. The most you'll pay is $9.95 a month, and you'll be directly supporting us, real people, not big corporations like Amazon or Netflix, not content created with AI. Wraith Rain is a small team of actual humans doing the best we can to transport you with romantic action and adventure stories. We really thank you for your support.
Everdark, Episode 101, Chosen. Last on Everdark, Christian, Caemorn, and Fiona travel deep into the Everdark. They run across two ghosts. Caemorn thinks they're a brilliant chance for Christian to train, only the ghosts have other ideas. Now we turn back to Julian and Damon. "Are you ready?" Damon asked Julian. Julian drew in a deep breath to calm his nerves.
If I mess this up...
"You won't," his master assured him.
If I do, though, you'll fix it, right?
Julian turned his face so that he was looking up at Damon. They were standing by a stand of potted plants and looking out at the second-floor balcony where people milled around. He was to graze on one of them. Not actually feed, just brush his lips across their necks. That would count. This was a game. Julian was jazzed to do it, but his usual cautiousness made him leery of making a mistake. Outing the existence of vampires was a big deal. Of course, Damon assured him and put a finger underneath Julian's chin, lifting it. "Now, who will you choose?" Julian nodded and turned back to the group. There were 4 men and 3 women. There was one couple on their own, 2 of the men. Both in their late 40s, elegantly dressed, sipping champagne and speaking desultory to one another as they surveyed the crowd beneath them. Julian touched their minds and received a torrent of images, the 2 of them sailing together in crisp whites, the sun on the water. That was how they had met, and it was still their passion. They had been together for 20 years and had married only 5 years ago. One was in finance, while the other was an artist. The artist still had dried paint underneath his nails. There had been a piece that he had been painting right up until they had to leave for the gala. He was still thinking about it. The texture of the oil paint on the canvas, the scent of linseed oil and old brushes, the colors that were like the rising sun. The financier had an aristocratic nose and fine face with a wiry figure. He loved to run, and he had done a triathlon just the weekend before. The water had been icy even through the thick neoprene lining of his suit. When he'd been out in that water, he had thought about continuing to just swim until exhaustion took him down. The thought was so powerful and so bleak and so out of step with the mild smile the man had on his face that Julian jerked back physically, even as he removed himself from the men's minds.
He's dying.
Julian gasped and felt his cheeks pale.
He hasn't told his husband yet.
Damon looked over to the couple and after a moment nodded, confirming what Julian had discovered. "There are several people within this building who will not live past the end of the month," Damon said. Julian swallowed the suddenly bitter saliva that filled his mouth.
You can tell that?
Damon nodded. "Yes, and more. For example," he pointed at one of the women in front of them in a pale blue dress. "She is coming down with an illness. By tomorrow evening, she will be quite sick, and—" He drew Julian's attention to an elderly man below them with a full head of white hair and very pale grey eyes. "His heart is diseased, and will give out before next week. And then she—"
Stop!
Julian closed his eyes. "What is wrong?" "Ah," Damon asked, then clearly felt what was wrong.
If I know they're gonna die, then...
Julian opened his eyelids.
Then shouldn't we do something about it?
"You mean turn them?" Damon's mind was not accessible to him at this moment, and Julian knew that meant that Damon wanted him to work it out himself.
I know we can't turn everyone. Some people must die,"
Julian said. He realized that Damon couldn't turn anyone else, otherwise he'd risk them dying a terrible death. Julian wasn't ready to turn anyone. He could feel that. He was too young, not to mention that his blood might kill as readily as Damon's did. "You are right. Death is a part of mortal life, and we should not interfere in it overly much," Damon answered mildly. Julian stared at the financier, who gently touched his husband's cheek with the back of one hand. They were so in love even after 2 decades. The fires had not been banked, and the financier wondered what he wouldn't give now to have just a few years more.
You did just turn all those vampires at Solus back into mortals.
Julian suddenly said.
So there are some slots open, aren't there? In a matter of speaking.
In a manner of speaking, yes. And he might be someone we'd consider. Why don't you go over there and find out if he is a possibility? Not just from your empathy towards his situation, but the person he is, Damon suggested.
Well, I thought the grazing game was to see how many we could, feed from, or in my case, brush with my lips before they noticed.
Julian laughed. It felt strange to stalk someone that he felt like he had begun to know, especially someone who had limited time left and wanted nothing more than to be alone with their partner. It is. You should do both. If you wish to advocate for someone, you must be in the best position to say who they are, Damon pointed out.
Right. I can't just ask you to fix it without being sure myself.
Julian nodded.
But how will I be sure?
Damon smiled. If I were to tell you that you will know it when you see it, I think you would be quite cross with me.
I would be. But I have a feeling that's the only answer you have for me. But surely you can tell if he would make a good vampire.
Julian cried. Yes, but this is something you must learn, and you learn by doing, Damon said. Julian sighed and scrubbed his face with one hand.
It's funny, but before I met you, Christian said that I would always leap before I looked. Now I'm being more cautious.
You always planned well in advance, Julian, and then you let your instincts lead you. But you trust them, Damon explained. This is new, and so you don't trust yourself quite yet.
But the only way to learn to trust myself is to do it?
Julian made that sound like a question, but he already knew the answer. He sighed.
Okay.
You can do this, Julian. I will be right here. Damon gently nudged him out from behind the foliage. Julian drifted over to the couple. He drained half of his champagne in one swallow, even though the alcohol didn't affect him very much. But it was a familiar thing to do. He went to the balcony railing and stood there just a few feet away from him.
Zachary, are you certain you're all right?
It was the artist asking. His voice was slightly thick from alcohol. He'd been drinking because he was certain Zachary was keeping something from him. He didn't know what. Was it an affair? A financial setback? It was bad news of some kind.
Let me get you another glass of champagne. This one's warm.
Zachary had hardly touched the champagne he had. His stomach was not doing well. The doctors had told him to expect nausea. He had actually lost 5 pounds this week. I'm fine, Drew, Zachary assured the artist, even though it was a lie. Julian could feel the man's pain in his bones and joints. Truly.
You're not.
Drew brought down his voice as one of the women nearby had glanced at him sharply.
I can tell.
I'm just a little tired and have a headache, Zachary said, downplaying his suffering. He smoothed his hands down the front of Drew's tuxedo, straightening imaginary wrinkles. He just wanted to touch his husband, feel the warmth and solidity of his chest under his hands.
I've got aspirin in the car. Let me go get you some.
Drew said almost desperately. Zachary was going to tell him no, but Julian touched his mind.
Let him go, then come over and speak to me.
Zachary stiffened, and Julian wondered if all he had done was frighten the other man. But then the stiffness left and Zachary smiled at Drew. All right, bring the aspirin and another glass of champagne. That should set me right.
Oh, good.
The relief that swept through Drew to be doing something, anything to help his husband was so sad. As Drew hurried off, Julian reached for Zachary's mind again.
Now come here.
He felt Zachary hesitate, but then he slowly approached Julian. He leaned on the railing a foot away. Julian felt Zachary's confusion. He found Julian intensely beautiful, but his heart really did belong to Drew. What was he doing coming near this strikingly handsome young man?
Will you tell him?
Julian found himself asking. He hadn't thought to begin this way. He was going with instinct. Hopefully, it wasn't wrong. Pardon me? Were you speaking to me? Zachary gave him an uncertain smile. Julian turned towards Zachary and he could see himself through Zachary's eyes. His skin was pale as marble. His eyes were this incredible purple color that shimmered in the light with red highlights. His lips were stained a deep rose. His hair was dark as night. The tuxedo he wore emphasized his muscled yet lithe figure, and he moved with preternatural grace that spoke of a predator despite his beauty. Zachary was both aroused and a little afraid.
Yes, Zachary, I was speaking to you.
Julian said.
Drew already knows that something is wrong, so you aren't sparing him any worry by remaining silent about the cancer diagnosis.
Zachary's eyes widened. How do you...
No?
Julian realized that this was part of the test. If Zachary fled from him, then he most likely wasn't a candidate for turning. But though the older man drew up straighter, he didn't run.
I know many things, like how you almost swam out into the ocean and never came back last weekend.
You can't know that. No one but me could know that, Zachary whispered. His eyes were filled with shock, but not terror. Julian concentrated as he went from touching Zachary's mind to his body. He had felt how Damon had done it with the woman with the cold and the old man with the heart condition. For a moment, he didn't see Zachary, but instead saw inside of him. A latticework of veins and arteries appeared over Zachary's body. Organs filled in next, but as lighted outlines, and then he could see the cancer. It was a darkness within the organs. It was swirling through Zachary's blood. It was everywhere.
I'm so sorry about what you're going through,
Julian said.
You've worked so hard to get to this point in your life when things are finally good, and then to find out that it's all going to be taken away, and you didn't even smoke.
Zachary's eyes, which had been as wide as saucers, now narrowed. Do you work at my doctor's office? Or do you hack computer systems in?
I grant you the cancer diagnosis I could have gotten that way, but what was in your head during the triathlon?
Julian lifted his eyebrow at Zachary as if to say, Come on, you know that's not possible. Zachary licked his lips. No, I suppose there's no way you could have hacked me, and that would have been a remarkably lucky guess. Julian realized that making Zachary believe that he could know these things was not useful at this time. It was Julian who had answers that he needed to know.
There's something after this life, Zachary,
Julian said and raised a hand when he realized that Zachary thought he was going to give him a pamphlet. Though really, with what he'd just shown him, if Julian had a pamphlet, maybe it would have been good to take it and read it front to back.
So you don't have to be afraid about turning to dust and nothingness. And don't worry, I'm not telling you to believe in a god for that to be true. It simply is.
We're like the little publisher that could, and do a lot of work for such a small team. Wraith Rain puts out new releases, sales, new art, previews of upcoming stories, and at least 2 free books or manga every month. If you don't want to miss anything, you have 2 options. One is to keep coming back to our YouTube community tab, which we use as a blog for quick announcements and polls. The other is to join our mailing list, where we go into even more detail. The link to both the community tab and our mailing list form is in the notes.
That's comforting, Zachary said, and there was a flare of hope in his mind. He had thought there was nothing. Though I suppose if I asked you how you knew that as well, you wouldn't tell me. Zachary's long, elegant hands were on the railing now. He was watching Julian with fascination. His mind, which had been honed to see beyond the obvious, was taking in the anomalies about Julian. Julian moved too smoothly. There was a coiled grace about him that reminded Zachary of big cats. His eyes were not that color because of contacts. Really, they were becoming quite red.
It's all connected,
Julian admitted. I don't think you're an angel of this afterlife, are you? Zachary let out another uncertain laugh, but he studied Julian's face carefully.
Not an angel,
Julian told him with a shrug. It wouldn't be fair to steal whatever was after from Zachary simply because he feared there was nothing. So a demon? Another laugh. This one was accompanied by narrowed eyes. Zachary was suddenly rethinking his belief system and the existence of demons, which would have seemed ridiculous to him not 5 minutes before, was suddenly quite possible.
Not a demon either,
Julian smiled. So, why are you speaking to me? Zachary asked. He was to the point, and Julian liked this. He was adapting to new facts quickly. That was good too, Julian guessed, for a vampire.
What if you had the power to save someone? Anyone, really, like yourself?
Julian looked down on the partygoers.
What if you could know if someone was sick or dying and could offer them health and eternal life and an existence that was filled with wonder?
Those are heady gifts indeed, Zachary answered. His fine mind, which was used to valuing things, was turning these ideas over. But there must be a catch. There always is. Julian thought of blood drinking. He would have been horrified about it before he'd met with Damon. But now it was a pleasure. Speaking of his master, he realized that Damon was listening carefully. His mind held no judgment as to what Julian was doing. This was Julian's show.
There is, but once you've accepted the new life, it won't bother you,
Julian admitted. Zachary rested his elbows on the railings and looked down at the crowd as Julian was doing. And you want to offer this to me?
The truth is that I want to offer it to everyone who is hurt or dying but I can't. That can't be how it is. Only a few can be turned.
Julian explained as he realized just how big a decision this was. Turn. Zachary spoke that word as if he were tasting it. It was familiar to him even though he was not connecting it to vampires. Vampires were like leprechauns and unicorns, wholly made up. He might be believing in demons, but hadn't yet let his mind expand completely beyond the boundaries he'd had before.
There are so many people that need help and would seize this opportunity,
Julian said, more to himself than to Zachary.
I didn't really think of it before, until I came here and was shown how many in this room alone could use the help.
So you can't turn everyone. Not surprising. Overpopulation, I suppose. People must die so that others can live. Zachary, though, did not sound as if he wanted to die himself. Who did? My mother told me on her deathbed that you have to be willing to stop playing at some point. That's the biggest rule of the game of life.
But you're not ready to stop playing. You've just begun.
Julian read his mind. But doesn't everyone think that way? At least those who were struck down young. The bitterness in Zachary's tone was hard to miss. Meanwhile, Julian moved through Zachary's mind. He was not a vegan, which might make him well near impossible for him to feed. He did have a predatory side that came out in his business dealings, but also he had a sense of honor. He had spared a company's pension plan in a takeover. He only really went after those with no mercy who had shown none to others. Julian was sure that he would do the same with vampire money. He could ensure that their investments were handled well. He would be incredibly useful in simply dealing with the wealthy and powerful. He was loyal, as evidenced to his behavior towards Drew and the small circle of friends he adored.
What if you could live, more than live, but Drew didn't come with you?
Julian asked, realizing that Zachary wouldn't be allowed to stay with his husband unless Drew was turned too. Why would that have to be? Zachary's heart beat dully in his chest at that thought, but he wasn't altogether rejecting it.
It doesn't necessarily, but it might,
Julian admitted. I wouldn't want to leave Drew alone, Zachary said, his forehead furrowed.
But you would be doing so if you died.
Julian pointed out. Yes, I suppose that's true. But to go on without him, I suppose that I would be doing that no matter what, too, Zachary said. Again, these answers seemed to indicate that Zachary was a good candidate, but there could be other, better ones. He'd just met Zachary. This was a limited pool of people. This was all just happenstance.
But Damon brought us up here to begin the game. That was not a coincidence. Does it mean that Damon thinks Zachary would be a good fit?
I thought I accepted the diagnosis, Zachary said suddenly. Death. 3 months.
2.
Julian contradicted him as he felt the cancer pulse within Zachary. God. Zachary shut his eyes and swallowed. Realizing what he'd done, Julian reached out but didn't touch Zachary as he said,
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said.
No, I'm glad to know. I have to put my affairs in order. I have to. Zachary's eyelids shot open and he was staring at Julian with an intensity that only a dying man could muster. Do I have to do that?
Maybe not,
Julian said. He wasn't sure what the threshold requirements were for someone becoming a vampire, but Zachary seemed to have traits he would think would be useful. Zachary grasped Julian's nearest hand in a tight hold. Tell me what I would have to do in order to make that a no. Julian could feel the drive behind this man. He had sensed an opening and he was going to take it, pursue it until the end. Julian had given him hope, and that was a dangerous thing. Zachary thought he was half mad, believing that this strange, beautiful young man could help him. But there was something about Julian that wasn't altogether human. Julian reached into the inside pocket of Zachary's tuxedo and drew out the man's phone. Zachary put his thumb against the reader and opened it. Julian then added Balthazar's phone number.
I'm not going to tell you anything more for now,
Julian said. He sensed Drew approaching up the stairs, juggling 2 glasses of champagne and some aspirin. He felt a stab of pity for Drew, though he might be chosen too.
But when you're ready, call this number.
When I'm ready for what? Zachary pressed. He was still hoping for more information. His logical brain wanted all the facts.
When you're ready,
Julian repeated, knowing somehow that Zachary would have a moment where he'd decided one way or the other to take the leap. Julian then leaned down and lightly brushed his lips over the pulse point of Zachary's throat. He heard Zachary inhale sharply, and the musky odor of arousal flooded the air, along with the slight, bitter scent of fear. Julian drew back and smiled at the man. He touched Zachary's mind once more, somehow knowing that just this touch was enough.
Now go. Have a good time with Drew,
Julian told him. Julian saw himself one last time through Zachary's eyes. Julian looked incredibly unreal, like a dream made flesh. He was nothing like the dull beings that before had seemed so lovely to Zachary's dying mind. Now, Julian seemed to light up the room, but he turned towards Drew, still loving him so much, but part of his mind was still thinking of another life. Damon's hands were suddenly around Julian's waist. He kissed the side of Julian's neck. That was well done.
Was it? I don't know.
Julian shook himself.
I've given him one more option. An option that will mean he has no peace.
Zachary wants to go on. He is the type to go on. He will mourn Drew if that part of his life cannot continue, but that is a necessary quality of surviving immortality. So you did choose well, Julian. Damon once more kissed him. Julian turned around in his master's arms, relishing the strength of his touch.
Or were you the one who did the choosing? You brought us up here in the first place. You must have known about him.
Damon just gave him a half shrug. It was you in the end who came to the same conclusion I did. They started to sway to the music. Damon spun and dipped Julian before gracefully drawing him back up again. People glanced over at them. Julian could see through their eyes how he and Damon appeared. They were beautiful, alluring, and again, people thought they seemed unreal somehow. It was then that Julian also realized that Damon had grazed on all of the other people on the balcony.
You drank from the woman with the cold?
Julian laughed.
She needs her strength, Damon.
Only a little bit. And I convinced her that it would be good to spend the weekend in bed. Damon admitted, not repenting at all. Remember, my one, that terrible things happen to mortals all the time. Only we can change their fates.
That's a lot of responsibility,
Julian said. People are in charge every day who do not care at all about the fates of those under their care. Damon's gaze drifted to a knot of well-dressed people. Julian recognized one of them as the mayor, and another of them was a...
That's a vampire with the mayor,
Julian hissed. More than that, Damon said with a small smile on his lips. That is a Calais vampire who is still loyal to their immortal. Let's go introduce ourselves, shall we? Join us next time for episode 102, Dig Deep.
If you're in the mood to listen to something really different, I recorded a 3-part short story in 2020 for Halloween. It's called Hero, and it's a gay vampire horror story. Definitely not romance. You can hear my first attempt at a dramatic narration. It's completely open to listen to on YouTube, and I'll post the link in the notes.
Everdark, episode 102, Dig Deep. Last on Everdark, Damon allows Julian to interview a man who might make a good vampire. He's dying, but doesn't quite want to go. Julian gets a chance to see himself through a human's eyes, but he and Damon are not the only vampires at the party. We now turn back to Christian.
Christian? Christian!
Fiona hissed.
What is wrong?
They don't want to be friends.
Christian answered her as he took a few steps back. He didn't want to take his eyes off the drifting sisters, who were smiling with an eagerness to take his second life that he found more than mildly disturbing.
They just agreed to kill me.
What?
Fiona surged forward, but again, Caemorn held her back.
Try to use your Iros powers to convince them otherwise.
Caemorn suggested.
I don't think I have enough time to do that. I don't quite have the calmness of mind to do it.
Christian answered as he continued to retreat from the two ghosts, whose minds were filled with images of dipping their ghostly fingers in his blood.
Can they do that? They're incorporeal.
But the ghosts, whether they could do it or not, were deep in the fantasy of ripping him apart.
You must be calm, Christian. You are in charge.
Somehow Caemorn's statements did not help.
Can they physically harm me?
Christian asked.
Yes, they can.
Caemorn answered.
Great.
Christian grimaced. One sister was drifting around to his right, while the other continued to approach him straight on. They were trying some kind of pincer maneuver.
Wonderful. They're strategic.
Images of them lapping at blood flowing from deep wounds in his throat, while the other one ate his eyeballs, had Christian's gorge rising. It wasn't helping him remain calm.
They're imagining eating me, Caemorn. I don't think I'm going to be able to divert them away from their chosen course.
Christian's voice rose at the end.
You're not even trying.
Caemorn tutted. It was true. Trying to touch and control the ghost's thoughts meant that he had to submerge himself in their fantasies of eating him, and he wasn't keen on doing that.
Use Hope's End, Christian. Use the daggers.
Aren't you going to help me?
Christian asked, as he saw the ghost to his right moving swiftly. She would get behind him, or the one in front would be right up on him.
No, not yet. Let's see how you do. There are only two of them,
Caemorn said.
Say the word, Christian, and I'll teleport us out of this mess. We'll leave Caemorn behind.
Fiona cast a dirty look at the Callie vampire. Christian's gaze swung between the bushes and the fast-approaching ghosts as he unsheathed the magical daggers. They hummed in his hands. The hum spread up his forearms and biceps and shoulders and thrummed in his chest.
You're a speaker to the dead. Nowhere is safe.
Caemorn's words from earlier echoed in his mind. There would be times when he wouldn't have Caemorn or Fiona or Julian or Balthazar or anyone with him. He needed to learn how to do this.
Not yet, Fiona. I want to try to do this.
Christian muttered as his eyes flickered between the two ghosts.
I'll give you a little rope, Christian, but don't mess this up. Balthazar is already going to kill all of us.
Fiona reminded him.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That was the last thing Christian said, before he rolled away from the two ghosts that swung at them with their insubstantial arms. But he felt the air move, and there was a whistling sound. He leaped up to his feet and spun around to face them once more. Their lips had writhed back from their teeth. They weren't human teeth. They were fangs. All of them were fangs.
Stop thinking like a human, Christian. You're stronger, faster, and better than they are.
Caemorn muttered the last.
Not helping.
Christian called as he sliced the daggers through the air in front of him. The stones and the hilts were glowing faintly. The hum and throb of them in his arms and chest made the weapons seem like a part of him. Yet he was still clumsy with them because he was scared. He could acknowledge that. It wasn't just the fact that they were ghosts, and though he might be a speaker to the dead and a vampire, he still had an atavistic fear of them. But their cruel minds were like daggers into his.
Are you going to fight them or dance with them?
Caemorn sounded bored. His heel hooked a tree root and he went sprawling onto the ground. The two ghosts were upon them. He heard Fiona let out a gasp, but Caemorn advised her to stay put. Christian was not so certain that was a good idea. The faces of the sisters rose above him. They were smiling, licking their lips and giggling. Their fingers reached down and stroked his cheeks, his throat, his chest, and even between his legs. Far from arousing him, everywhere they touched his flesh seemed to shrink away from their fingertips. They turned to look at one another in their zeal.
He will die well.
The one on the left said.
No, sister. He will die screaming and sweet on our tongues.
The other enthused. They both turned back to him and smiled. Even before they reached for him, their minds touched his. Christian's head rocketed back, and he struck himself against the ground from the force of that connection. Black spots flooded his vision. His hands lay numb and lifeless at his sides. The daggers were even more useless as he didn't have the strength to lift them. He found he couldn't even breathe.
We have to help him, Camon.
Fiona's voice wafted over to him.
No, just wait, Fiona. He's stronger than you think.
Camon answered her.
We can't risk this.
Fiona's voice was high and tight.
Your wyvern, teleporting out of danger is in your blood. Christian must learn to tussle with death.
Camon explained.
That's madness,
She cried.
No, it is his life. Fiona, your loyalty to him speaks well of your character, but it will not make him strong.
Camon told her.
He needs to face terrible things. This is a controlled environment.
There is nothing controlled about the Everdark.
She snarled.
Do you think the two ghosts are a threat to me?
Camon asked her. That was the last he could hear of their argument. The ghost's fantasies continued to run rampant and slam into his mind. He witnessed his arms being pulled off while he was still alive. He saw himself eviscerated and the women pulling out his intestines as they giggled. Their thoughts were like wriggling worms. He didn't want to keep touching their minds, to get more deeply immersed in their sick thoughts, but he couldn't keep them away. They flowed over him like water. He was drowning in them. He breathed and spat them out. Christian bared his teeth and tried to put some life into his deathly cold limbs, but they felt like ice blocks that were hardly a part of him. He imagined his limbs snapping off at the joints because they were so cold.
They're draining him, Camon. Let me go. I need to get him out of here.
Fiona cried.
He will find a way to stop them. You must give him time, Fiona. Don't assume he's like you. He isn't.
Camon hissed. Christian wished he had as much faith in him as Camon did. He was retreating deep within his body, within his mind. He couldn't seem to block out the sisters' thoughts. He actually started seeing beyond their current thoughts to old ones. He saw who they had been. They were setting the table for dinner. Their mother was hunched over the hearth. A boar was turning on the spit over the fire. The fat was dripping down onto the coals and hissing. The smoke drifted up and flavored the fatty meat. The skin crackled and darkened. Christian could almost taste the salty, fatty goodness on his tongue. Their mother was a pretty, faded woman who looked much like her daughters. She lived for them. They knew this and loved her for it, and chafed under her observant eye. Their father was often gone, hunting and trapping and trading much of what he caught for other things they needed. It reminded Christian of the Americas at the earlier turn of the century. He was gone from home, but they hoped he would be back soon. They were eager for them. There was a knock on the door. The sisters looked at each other in surprise. They weren't expecting anyone. They lived apart from their neighbors. They were both excited and afraid. Their mother's right hand went to the axe by the side of the hearth. The one sister asked who it was. For long moments there was no sound, and then there was a terrible bang that Christian mentally flinched from. The girls clutched at each other as their mother hefted the axe. She made a soft yet firm command for them to arm themselves. They grabbed fireplace instruments. Their hands were shaking.
What happened to you that you changed from normal people to ones that want to rip and rend and taste blood?
Christian thought. The door to their home shattered, and Christian saw what they saw. Red eyes, 7 feet off of the ground, set in a face that should have been on a wolf. But it was much too big, much too humanoid.
Werewolf?
Christian realized. It was inside the house so fast that it seemed between one blink and the next. The creature was in the doorway, then on top of their mother. She had the time to bring the axe back, but not flow it forward before her throat was ripped out. She staggered backwards after the werewolf had bitten through the front of her neck. Her eyes were huge in shock. She took a few steps as blood arced from her throat, and then she fell like a tree felled in the forest. Blood pooled around her in an ever-widening lake. And Christian was horrified at how his stomach clenched with hunger. And then the werewolf turned on the sisters. It leaped, and its claws raked both sisters' faces. Blood spurted, the whites of the eyes were parted. Screams turned to gurgles as throats filled with blood. and then it was on top of them like they were on top of him, feeding. He yanked himself out of those memories. The sisters had been alive for a long time as they had been devoured, so very long. His eyes cleared of the memory, and he saw the sisters' faces. Though they were white and blue ghostly colors, he could still remember them as the living, breathing people they had been. But whatever pity he had for them was soon swamped by the knowledge that whatever had occurred to turn them, or maybe they were this way all along, they intended to do to him what had been done to them, maybe worse.
There is a sad lack of sexy merman stories out there, but I'm happy to say that I've done my part. The Merman series on Amazon is a 5-novella gay romance between human Gabriel and his bonded mare partner, Prince Cassilis. Here's the summary. Gabriel Braven's destined love is a merman, Prince Cassilis Nerion. Problem is, Gabriel doesn't believe mermen are real, and worse, Gabriel's parents died of drowning, so he has no love for the sea. But the sea is Gabriel's destiny in more ways than love. Caught by high tide in a cave, Gabriel drowns, but does not die. Cassilis brings him to the surface, but tells Gabriel that he must return to the waves or perish, for Gabriel is becoming a merman. This series is in a box set and is in Kindle Unlimited, so I'll just link to that in the notes for your convenience. The books are also available in audiobook.
He had to do something. The sister on his right leaned down as if to kiss him. His vision was filled with her face, but then an idea came to him. He was a vampire. He was the speaker to the dead. He was an Eiros. Their minds were his playground, right? Surely they were.
So, what if I change what they're thinking from fantasies to nightmares?
Christian's eyes narrowed. The sisters' arms were outstretched. Their fingers looked like curved claws. He could almost feel their nails raking down his skin. He reached for the sister's mind on the right. She was imagining hooking her nails into his cheeks and gouging deep furrows that would bleed profusely. He grabbed that memory and crushed it. She jerked to a halt. Confusion filled her eyes, and she shook her head as if to clear it. But he didn't let her have a chance. He shoved a vision into her head instead. He imagined that the dagger in his right hand thrust into her ghostly chest. He imagined that the light that made up her ethereal form was sucked into the blade and into the red gem set in the hilt. He imagined her screaming silently as she was trapped inside of Hope's End forever. The other sister jerked her head to the side, confused by the other's abrupt cessation of movement. She reached for her sister that he had shoved the vision into. Her eyes grew wide and her mouth opened in an oh of pain for her sister. She whipped back towards him, her eyes narrowing now, her lips peeling back from her fangs. She lunged down towards him. Christian thrust the daggers into her midsection. His icy limbs obeyed him. They gradually warmed as he kept them there inside of her ethereal body. It wasn't like stabbing into flesh, organs, and bone. At least he didn't think it was. He hadn't had the dubious pleasure of stabbing someone. It was more like jabbing into viscous water. There was hardly any give. In fact, his arms shook as the force he applied was way too much. She froze. There didn't seem to be any effect from the stab at first, even though he kept Hope's End inside of her. The hum that the blades gave off suddenly grew stronger and warmth flooded him. The ghost's eyes widened once more with alarm, with fear, with knowledge. Then, with a silent scream, just like he had imagined, she was pulled inside the gems. They glowed brightly.
That's why they call these daggers Hope's End,
Christian said to the remaining sister.
There's no more hope for you. No more hope for her. I know you can understand me.
She didn't need a translator. She knew what he meant. She fled into the woods, or she would have, but she didn't get very far. Camorn stepped out of the bushes, looking pristine despite being rained on by needles and sap, and raised one hand. She froze not 10 feet away. Then she turned, and with unblinking eyes she came back to the Kali vampire. A faint smile was on Camorn's lips as he fished out a gem from an inner pocket. This one was green. Camorn sent a puff of air towards her. The substance of her was disturbed, becoming no more than the sparkling blue dust that drifted towards the green gem, then disappeared inside of it. Caemorn rubbed the gem against the front of his shirt as if to polish it. Then he slipped it into the pocket he had taken it from.
See? It wasn't so hard.
Caemorn said. Fiona raced to Christian's side and helped him to sit up.
Are you all right?
Christian put a shaking hand to his right temple.
I'm not exactly sure. I have a splitting headache and probably frostbite.
He looked down at his skin where the ghosts had touched. He fully expected it to be frosted grey. But they were normal, flesh-coloured. He flexed and released his hands around the daggers. His fingers moved like normal. He almost couldn't believe it. Every evil thing they had imagined had felt almost real. He reached up and touched his cheeks. No gouges there, no wounds.
You were in their minds almost the whole time,
Caemorn said. While Fiona stroked his cold limbs, helping bring life to them again, Caemorn just stood there and regarded him evenly.
I'm fine, Caemorn. Thank you for asking.
Christian put out. Caemorn just lifted an eyebrow. Christian sighed.
I saw how they died.
Fiona gasped.
You saw how they died?
This had Caemorn looking interested, in a way that his health had not.
You saw that? I cannot believe that it was on the surface of their minds.
Christian frowned.
No, it wasn't. I think I was trying to understand how they had become like they were.
How they became ghosts, you mean?
Fiona asked uncertainly.
No, how they became killers who lusted after blood and rending flesh.
Christian explained.
And how they died showed you that?
Fiona asked. Caemorn stared with a quiet intensity at him.
That's quite a gift you have there.
A werewolf killed them.
Christian found himself staring at Caemorn as he said this. The Kali vampire had a thing for werewolves. It was too much of a connection to think that Tarn or Farun had anything to do with these sisters' deaths.
Then it must have been terrible indeed.
Caemorn replied lightly.
They were alive while it ate them.
Christian replied. Fiona offered him a hand to stand up. Christian was annoyed and unnerved that his limbs were still stiff and wobbled underneath him for a moment. Caemorn saw this as well. He pursed his lips but said nothing.
This encounter has drained Christian. We need to go back, Caemorn.
Fiona said after studying him for long moments.
We can't.
Christian cried, as he thought that Caemorn might agree with her.
We can, and we will.
Fiona answered tightly.
Surely we're closer to the Well of All Souls than we are to the Spire?
Christian looked between the two of them.
It would make more sense to do what we came here to do. Balthazar is going to kill all of us for going this far.
The two other vampires said nothing. He hadn't convinced them.
I risked all of this to help Julian's parents,
Christian said. Feeling was coming back into his limbs now.
I can't just go back to Balthazar now. He won't let me out of his sight after this. We won't get another chance. And Callie will take the Harrows to who knows where. We'll never find them.
Balthazar will listen to reason,
Fiona said slowly.
Will he, in time though?
Caemorn lifted an eyebrow.
Probably not.
She admitted. She shook her head and put a hand to her temple.
Can you blame him? The Harrows, though good people, are dead. Christian is alive.
I can bring the Harrows back.
Caemorn said flatly.
Is that really true, Caemorn?
Fiona put her hands on her hips and stared hard at the Kali vampire.
I have told King Damon that I can. It would be the height of foolishness to make that claim if it was not true.
Caemorn replied dryly.
But that is a risk I am certain you would take.
She scoffed.
Once it is clear that you had killed the parents of his fledgling, what choice did you have but to make some ridiculous offer?
King Damon would know if I was lying,
Caemorn said.
I think you could convince yourself you could do it, even if you weren't sure you could,
She said.
Maybe he's willing to give you that chance, but no one has been able to accomplish such a thing. Not even Callie. Yet you can.
Fiona shook her head.
I can.
Caemorn sounded so certain, but he always sounded that way. He was cold. He had been this way when he was about to be burned at the stake. So really it was no guarantee that he was telling the truth.
You better not have lied, Caemorn,
Christian said quietly.
It'll break Julian's heart if you can't. It'll be like losing them all over again. He might not recover from that. And if that's the case, I don't think there'll be anything that King Damon won't do to make you suffer.
Caemorn inclined his head.
I am in agreement with you, Christian. I can do this thing, but we need to get those crystals back. I am willing to go on, but I know that you are weak on energy, and that is not a state you can be in.
But I can't drink from anyone other than Balthazar,
Christian said.
You cannot, so I have a suggestion.
Caemorn turned towards Fiona.
Go get Balthazar and bring him here.
Christian's eyes widened and he waved a hand in the air.
No! Didn't we all just agree that Balthazar won't let me do this
If we returned you to him. But if Balthazar is here, and Fiona refuses to take us back, he will have no choice but to go forward.
Caemorn stated. Fiona let out a sharp laugh.
You think he's going to accept that I won't take him back?
Are you afraid he'll use his mind control on you?
Caemorn asked.
He could.
She blazed at him.
You downplay his powers, but he's Iros. Caemorn, he can make us both do a jig if he wants to.
But he won't. He's honourable. And Christian here will convince him that going forward is the way.
Caemorn told her calmly.
He's afraid of who he was and what he did during the war, Fiona. That's why he won't harm us.
You really think that?
Her eyebrows crawled into her hairline.
Maybe that's why you won't connect with anyone.
Caemorn said quietly.
Maybe, like him, you don't trust yourself, Wyvern.
She stared at him coldly.
One of these days, Caemorn, you are going to get yourself in trouble with that mind of yours that you can't get out of.
And then she disappeared. She returned, though, in moments. Balthazar stared about him in confusion until his eyes alighted on Christian, and then went to the twin moons and the forest around them. His eyes narrowed. Christian, Balthazar said with quiet determination, you are in so much trouble. Join us next time for episode 103, The Moment Not Seen.
I have many completed gay romance series on Amazon. There's Cinders and Ashes, a gay high fantasy series loosely based on Cinderella. The Vampires Club, a fast-paced contemporary gay romance series that has vampires and takes place in a nightclub. The Bodyguard, which is a bodyguard protectee slow burn romance with a supernatural twist, and much more. Every month, I make at least 2 of these books free to download. If you want to know when that happens, the easiest way is to join my old-fashioned mailing list to get free book alerts. I'll post a link to the mailing list form in the notes.